Mike, in 10 years from now, will we be around?
Nope, but these games probably will be.
It's kind of morbid.
Yeah,
I
sorry.
hope that's untrue. I hope our prediction is wrong about that.
I just want to be somewhere on this earth, hopefully.
That's fair.
I'm Mike.
I'm Nick.
We're the Brothers Murph.
Ooh,
hey, that's
one.
how we know we're going to be around
yeah.
10 years. These are games that we are dominating the moment.
Yes.
And
we think are going to continue to be in the zeitgeist.
Exactly. Games that we think are going to stick around. We have classics and stuff from 10 years ago that are still played. And so we are trying to do our best to predict.
Yeah, we are trying to do our best to predict. And we're also going to say that we're only choosing games from 2020 to now.
Correct.
We're not going to start games from 8 years ago because they've already lasted 8 years. They're probably going to last another 2.
This is more speculative.
Yeah,
than that.
so we're going from 2020 forward. So if there's any game like before that, that's why it's not on the list. Is because we need to have some kind of range. So 2020 to now, what games do you think are still going to be around in 10 years? Our number 10 is going to be Marvel United. And I'm gonna go ahead and say specifically Marvel United, although you really could throw in like the whole United series. We can say that now because now there's DC Heroes United. I got a hunch there's gonna be more IPs in the United range. And for that reason alone, you could argue that this game is going to be around for 10 years because they just keep supporting it. Now, I will say that's not there's lots of games that are out there that will be around in 10 years because the publisher just keeps publishing more of it. But that doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, mean because the merit of the game is what's keeping it around, whereas I think this list is more about that. And I do actually think that Marvel United would be around even without them constantly having more and more and more campaigns for it with different IPs. For that reason alone, it's definitely be around. But nonetheless, I think Marvel United is just that, it's that really, really good kind of like gateway cooperative game that you can use to get so many people in the hobby. And because it's Spin Master and Spin Master games tend to be on the cheaper side, a lot of times like the base game of this will go on like crazy sales and it's like already not very expensive, but there was a time like on Amazon, it was like $5. Again, that's kind of an anomaly, but nonetheless, it's a relatively cheap game, despite the fact having really great miniatures. And I think that mix of having really simple gameplay, cooperative gameplay, it's always, I feel like, easier to get people into the hobby when you can play cooperatively because there's not that awkward, I know the game, you don't, so I'm gonna crush you kind of thing. Great miniatures, an IP that a lot of people like. I really think this game is just gonna stick around because of that. There's a lot of people, I think it's like Z Garcia's #1 game, if I remember correctly. It's in my top 50. I love Marvel United, and there is a ton of content out there. Some of it's Kickstarter exclusive, but there's a lot of it that's not. A lot of like the packs you can still just get like game stores. You can get more and more stuff for this. I just think that mix of simplicity, it's such a simple game. It's so easy to get to the table. And even though there are tons and tons and tons of characters for it, because the game is like 30 minutes, you can actually play with it all, which is my kind of big beef with a lot of these massive Kickstarter games that, you know, when you get the games, you know, they're this tall of all this content, but a lot of times those games are like 3-hour games, and so you'll never play with all of that. But Marvel United, you actually can play through it because it's like a 30-minute game. So I really think this game is going to stick around. Yes, they're still supporting it. They're going to keep supporting it, keep making them millions of dollars. But nonetheless, I think even without that, it would stick around for a long time because of the fact that it's so simple, it looks nice, it's got a good IP, and it's great.
Number 9 is Nucleum from Board&Dice. This is a big game where you are trying to, at least in the base game, bring nuclear energy to Germany. And you are doing this kind of via developing routes between cities, building up buildings, and then energizing them, making use of coal and nuclear energy to kind of flip those tiles over. This game has a lot of comparisons to Brass because you do have these buildings you're putting out. You're hoping to get them to their flip side, which makes them valuable. You are building networks to be able to transport energy back and forth. And this is just a game that, I mean, Brass Birmingham is #1 of all time. This game shares some DNA with that, and I think appeals to the types of players that really are going to want to invest in the same game and really learn and try to kind of perfect it, for lack of a better word. Really try to see like how dialed in, how kind of efficient can I make my time with this game? And then Board&Dice has been supporting this well. There's already an expansion where you are now in Australia. It gives you a little bit of a different thing you can kind of do. They've announced another expansion that's coming out this very same year that the first expansion came out. So it seems like Board&Dice is interested very much in supporting this game and giving people, you know, as many ways to play it or enjoy it as possible. And I think that's why it's going to stick around.
I honestly think Lost Ruins of Arnak is going to be around for about 10 years or so, or probably more. This game has been well supported by CGE because it's been very, very successful, but this and another game that's going to come up later on the list came out in 2020, and it's a worker placement deck building game that is very, very popular because there's so many things you can do with it. But I don't know, this game is just immensely popular. People love this game, and I do too, to be fair. But like, I don't know, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't really have much of like a, this is why I think this game is gonna be around for a long time. I just think Lost of Ruins Arnak is going to. I think it has that nice gameplay of, again, people like deck building, people like worker placement. The game is always slightly different in terms of like what different sites are going to come out, because you're kind of exploring through these jungles, finding like lost ruins, of course, and you can do actions there and get certain things. And this game is all about kind of trying to extend your rounds. Every round, you're only going to have a certain amount of things you can do, but as you get more resources, get more things, you're like, oh, now I got these 2 arrowheads. Okay, now I can do this action. Ooh, that then gave me this kind of ruby. Okay, now I can do this action. Oh, that gave me this. Okay, I can tap my assistant and get this thing, and now I can do this action. It's all about just trying to extend your round, where every round you're just like, okay, what can I get to do one more thing, just one more thing, just one more thing. And I think that's very intriguing to people, where you can put together these really great games, put together these really great rounds where you're like, I'm still going, I'm still going, I'm still getting stuff coming in, I'm still taking actions, and it just is very, very satisfying. It works well at all player counts. It's got a great solo mode. They've been supporting it, and I just think it's going to be around. I just think that people really, really like it, and that it's going to stay that way for at least 10 years.
Next up is Heat Pedal to the Metal. This is a racing game, kind of pure and true, where you're going through different types of maps and managing your hand of cards in order to kind of go as fast as you can on the straightaways, but knowing that you have to slow down and navigate turns. And you're doing this by shifting gears, which will control the amount of cards you have to play on a turn, which makes it a little easier to navigate those different stretches of the map. Now, the reason we think this is going to be around for a long, long time is racing games typically have a lot of appeal. They cater to a lot of players. This is 6 players in the base game. I think it was up to 7 or maybe 8 with the expansion that's come out. And these games are kind of really expandable. You can always make more maps. You know, you can always make different courses that offer, you know, a new little kind of stitch that hasn't been explored before. In the first expansion, Heavy Rain, they have a map, I think in Japan, that's kind of flooded, and you have to go through these kind of like giant puddles and stuff. And that's going to be very different. This game itself also has a ton of modules and things you can add into the game. There are upgraded cards. You can go just play the standard hand of cards, or you can draft these upgrades, which do all sorts of crazy stuff and give you uniqueness to your vehicle. There's ways you can upgrade your card. There are different conditions that will affect the different stretches of the maps and stuff. So you can play all sorts of ways, and then you can play in kind of like a Grand Prix and do a tournament where you play map after map and things like that. There's, again, so many ways to play, and this is a game that can accommodate so many players or plays really well with AI. So even if you have a lower player count, the kind of bot racers provide a really good challenge. I think there's a ton of just kind of ways and reasons to play this game. And I feel like something like this is going to be supported, will stick around for a long time because you can always make more maps. And I, you know, for my money, I want them all.
Number 6 is going to be Cascadia. Cascadia, it won the Spiel des Jahres, so that reason alone kind of guarantees it's going to be around for about 10 years, because Spiel des Jahres games tend to do very well for obvious reasons. It's the most prestigious board game award in the world. And so Cascadia, again, is a very light family weight, well, it's not super, super light, but it's a family weight tile placement game where you're placing out habitats, putting animals in those habitats, trying to score those animals. In each game, the way the animals score will change, as there's like 5 different scoring for each animal type. There are a lot of games that I kind of think fall into like the Cascadia realm of things. There's like harmonies, you know, there's even things like Aqua, which have different themes and stuff, but like are ultimately just kind of fall into that weight where even if they don't play similar, like harmonies and Cascadia kind of play similar-ish, but like even games that don't really play similarly, they're just in that same weight of like kind of like nature-y, family weight games that are kind of casual, easy to get to the table. But I think Cascadia is going to persist on through, not saying those games won't continue on as well, but I think Cascadia is going to continue on through all of them. It just is, it's very well supported, and it's just that mix of like, it's just easy to get to the table. And I think for so many of these games, particularly family weight games, if it's easy to get to the table, it will get to the table, and it'll continually get to the table, and people will just keep enjoying it. And I think Cascadia has that wonderful best sellable art. I think there's just something appealing about the theme, appealing about the gameplay. Non-gamers will pick it up. Non-gamers can understand it. It's just one of those games that's going to persist on for a long time, and I'm happy for it because I really like Cascadia. I think it's a great game. Flatout Games just crushes it all the time. I'm so happy for them. And I just think Cascadia, I mean, they just did the Cascadia roll, right? The rolling hills and rolling rivers, and they did super, super well. And so it's just like, okay, like it just kind of continues on. I think Cascadia is going to keep doing that for a long time.
Next up is this little guy, Sea Salt and Paper. This is a small little card game that just has a ton of appeal with this really cool kind of origami art. You know, little card games are I don't want to say a dime a dozen, but there's always new card games and stuff. So when one kind of really hits well and sticks in your mind, I think it's really kind of a special trick. And Sea Salt and Paper is one that, because it's on Board Game Arena, for example, people are really playing a lot. We see tons of numbers of people playing Sea Salt and Paper every single month, and they don't get tired of it. So I feel like this is one that you will kind of stick around with. It's got a simple turn structure. It's really kind of set collection type things. You can draw cards from a deck and choose one and discard a card, or take a card from one of the discard piles, one of the, you know, the top card that's available. And you are either trying to get these pairs of cards that will give you a special action once you have 2 of them and they're worth a point, or you can collect, you know, shells and things that are just going to be straight up set collection. Now, the kind of tricky, fun part about this is once you get to at least 7 points, you can choose to end the round if you wish. You don't have to, and you may or may not want to, depending on if you think you are in first place, because there are 2 ways you can end the round. You can end it kind of safely. Everyone more or less scores their points, and then that's it. Or if you're pretty sure you have the highest score, you can call last chance. Everyone except for you gets one final turn, and they get to then hopefully better their situation. And then if you win the bet, you get a higher reward, but you also risk not having the highest score, which means you don't really get a ton that round. You really get kind of a nuked for that round. So those kinds of discussions, those kind of, you know, things to consider, kind of playing your opponents, are always going to be interesting. And it's got really, really appealing origami art to boot. So we think it's going to be around for a while.
Number 4 is going to be Hegemony. Lead your class to victory. This is one of the games on the list that we actually haven't played, but I want to play it. We're planning on playing it very soon here. Hegemony kind of took over the world last year, you know, in terms of the heavy board game space. Again, this isn't showing up in Target, you know, but like in terms of the kind of heavier, very BGG-centric board game space, which tends to lean a lot heavier, because again, if you made it to BGG, you're already starting to lean heavier, right? You're not playing Munchkin for the most part. And Hegemony is just a masterpiece from what everyone says. Even if it's not going to be your kind of game, even I'm not sure if I'm going to like Hegemony, but I understand that apparently it's a masterpiece. Everyone we've talked to has played it, has absolutely not liked it, adored it. We have friends of ours who were just like, I can't stop thinking about it. And that's what this game does. This is a game where you are taking a various class. There's like the capitalist class, the working class, I think the middle class, and then the state, I think is who it is. Different kind of governments, different parts of society, and they all have benefits, they all have weaknesses, and you're trying to get your kind of like, you're trying to further your class in life, you know? So like the working class, you know, that's where a lot of the people are. The capitalist class has all the money, and so you're working out deals with each other, all this different kind of stuff. Again, I don't know if it's going to be a game for me, but this is a game that is going to stick around. It's already in the top 100 of BGG. That's a pretty good indication. If it's in the top 100 BGG, it's probably going to stick around for 10 years. Actually, that's a very good indication. And this one has been skyrocketing up the BGG list, and I think it's probably going to end up in the top, knowing BGG, the top 100 on BGG, my guess is this is probably going to end up in the top 20, maybe even the top 10. I do think it has that kind of ability because of the fact that people love it so much. And I think it's just gonna be around. Again, this is one of those games where it's like, even if this game isn't for me, and I'm not sure if it's going to be, I can still acknowledge that it's probably a masterpiece. And it's gonna be around for that reason alone. People love it.
Next up is Arcs. This is a game that's really captured the moment right now. This is a big area control, in-your-face, kind of aggressive space battler game that uses kind of trick-taking like mechanisms at its core in order to kind of determine the types of actions you're going to do and maybe the, you know, kind of how strong of an action you're going to be able to take. So this is a game that I think is just going to have a lot of things to kind of explore with the expansion materials that they put in there, giving yourself asymmetric abilities, the ability to play kind of a little three-game mini campaign. There's gonna be a lot of things to explore because the game will kind of change and morph, which is something the Leader Games has done a lot of in the past, is just finding ways to kind of invest and make this a lifestyle game. Arcs is just a beautiful production. The trick-taking mechanism at the center allows you to, you know, play a card to dictate what kind of action you're taking, but you can also decide to not play what was led. You can switch things around and do whatever action you kind of want, but you're not gonna be able to do as strong of an action, or you can play a stronger card to be able to kind of seize the initiative and things like that. There's just a lot of fun stuff going on, and that's just in the base game. Again, once you start adding in asymmetric player powers and stuff, I think this is gonna be one that people are gonna wanna really invest in, kind of like a Root did, and really kind of keep coming back to explore, exploit your, you know, players' abilities and things like that, and try to just get really, really great at it.
Number 2 is going to be Dune Imperium. Dune Imperium, we talked about Lost Ruins of Arnak earlier, about the kind of games that are a mix of deck building and worker placement. Dune Imperium is the other one that came out that year, and as successful and as popular as Lost Ruins of Arnak is, Dune Imperium is, I think, more popular, at least amongst like heavier gamers. Dune Imperium is gonna be, I think Dune Imperium is going to be around in the same sense that like Terraforming Mars is, in the fact that like it's always getting played, it's always getting supported, and it's going to be around forever. I honestly believe that. I think it's one of those more modern games that's just gonna be, it's a modern classic, and as far as like hobby games, heavy games, that is gonna be one of the games that people constantly talk about, one of those games that people are always playing forever. You know, it's just, it falls into that same category as like a, you know, Scythe has been around for a long time. Again, Terraforming Mars, I think, is the perfect example of like, people will play Terraforming Mars forever. They will just never stop playing it. And I think Dune Imperium is gonna be the exact same way. This is based obviously in Dune. The Dune world, there's some worker placement, you know, stuff. You're battling. It's got a little bit of like hidden knowledge where when you're battling and stuff like that, you have cards that you can play to like increase your strength. There's a lot of that kind of stuff. It's one of the reasons why it's not necessarily always the game for me, is because I don't really like that in games that kind of like hidden, haha, I have actually 5 extra powers. One of the reasons why I'm not a massive Blood Rage fan. But nonetheless, Dune Imperium, again, it's kind of like, we're talking about Hegemony the last time I was here talking, was like, even if it's not necessarily a game for me, and I don't think Dune Imperium will ever be like necessarily my kind of game, that game is a masterpiece, and it is not gonna go anywhere. I think it's going to be one of those big heavy games that's going to stay in the top 10 probably for a very, very, very long time, if forever, because it's just never ever going to go away. Dune Imperium is massively popular. It's not quite number 1, but I think it's going to stay here forever.
We'd be silly if we didn't mention Ark Nova, as this is a game that has basically dominated the hotness on Board Game Geek ever since it was kind of announced, and then certainly when it came out. This is just a Euro's Euro, as it were, where you are building a zoo, and you are kind of trying to work your way through having a zoo that has a lot of appeal by having different cool enclosures and things like that with awesome animals, and then focusing your efforts on conservation projects as well, because your fame track, or your appeal track, I should say, and your conservation track will need to cross in order for you to eventually win the game. So you have these kind of two different routes you can go, and you'll probably work on a blend of the two, taking these different actions along the way to kind of work with sister zoos and build up universities and things like that, all in this kind of goal of conservation and animal care. So I think this is one that has a really cool action selection system at the middle, where you're going to choose one of your 5 actions that are based on these cards, and basically how long that card has been in the queue for you, the stronger and stronger it becomes. And they are in between strength 1 and 5. If you take a strength 5, you're going to be able to do more things with your action than if it were a strength 1. And so you're trying to sequence your actions so you can always be taking actions when they're the most powerful they could possibly be, and then trying to figure out kind of the order of operations to find a flow with that. I think it's a really brilliant kind of core of the game that has a lot of appeal with the theme. They now have an expansion which adds kind of more aquatic creatures and things to explore like that. So this is one that just always is the most played, one of the most talked about. Even if they don't have any new content for the game at that very moment. And that, I think, is just not an accident, right? That's not a fluke. It certainly wouldn't still have this kind of appeal at this point if it wasn't something really special. So we've seen no slowdown for Ark Nova. I can anticipate that is still going to be a major game in this hobby in 10 years.
So that is 10 games that I feel pretty confident about these.
I do too. I mean, okay, these things are always subjective and stuff. And of course, we have no idea about the future, but we feel pretty good about the odds for these to make it. Yeah. So I think the only thing we should do now is come back in 10 years and see if we were all correct.
If we haven't driven BGG away yet, we will come back. We will come back in 10 years. Remind me in the comments.
Yeah, just say, if you could tell us in 10 years, like, hey, you need to make that thing.
2032, Murphs. Oh, 2034.
We'll be like, what? I can't see that. Anyway, so those are some speculations, but we want to know from you, these can be your favorite games. What games do you think you're like, you know what, there's still going to be people at every game night playing this on table a decade from now?